This Yuletide Miniseries is a replay of episodes originally published in 2024. This way, the episodes are conveniently queued up in your podcast player so you don't have to go searching for them, and you never lose your spot in the listening order. As always, we're celebrating Yuletide in real time in the Numinous Network. I hope you'll join us for daily altar time from 10 to 10:30 a.m. Pacific, starting December 21st, winter solstice, and going through till New Year on January 1st. We're gathering on Zoom to check in, light our candles, and do a 20-minute guided trance journey to connect with the Yuletide theme of the day. So join us in the Numinous Network for Yuletide. Sign up at carmenspaniola.com. Welcome back to The Spirit of Yuletide, a Numinous podcast mini-series where we explore European folk magic traditions of the winter season. Thanks for being here. If you're familiar with my cookbook, The Spirited Kitchen, this mini-series will be a companion and massive expansion to the overview in the Yuletide chapter. And I'm not going to say this in every episode, but these first few, I just want to say, if you're not familiar with the book and you enjoy this podcast, you'll definitely like the book because it's the same concept, animist, anti-capitalist folklore traditions for the entire wheel of the year, every season. It makes an excellent gift. In this episode, we're learning some of the folklore and myths surrounding the plants we so often see connected to Yuletide and the winter. Now, granted, some of these are more common for us witches and herbalist types to associate with this time of year. And then there are some that we don't see as often anymore. Maybe they're a bit old-fashioned, but perhaps they have such great merit and good medicine that maybe they ought to make a comeback. So I wanted to include some of those lesser known ones as well. Now, like all folklore, popular plant knowledge shifts over time. There was a time when if someone sent a New Year's card with an illustration of an elf pushing a wheelbarrow full of forget-me-nots, that would have made visual sense to people. Nowadays, many people don't recognize or know the name of a forget-me-not, and if they did, they might find it pretty strange to see the image of a spring flower on a holiday card. It might look really out of place. Holiday greeting cards were invented in the 1840s by the director of the Victorian and Albert Museum in London as a way to, quote, perpetuate kind recollections between dear friends, unquote. Now, the first holiday greeting card depicted a triptych of images. On the left and right were scenes of giving alms to the poor, and in the center was an image of an intergenerational family and friends sitting down to a feast dinner and raising glasses for a toast. It's old-fashioned, but familiar kind of scene to the contemporary mind. Now, by the 1880s, holiday cards had surged in popularity and were a staple of the season. However, their imagery was much more zany and almost kind of manic than we see today. Now, regular listeners of this podcast will remember that era, the Industrial Revolution, was the time of the rise of spiritualism, secret societies like the Order of the Golden Dawn, and the proliferation of occult practices like tarot reading. And in many ways, it was like a golden age of spiritual appropriation when people were mixing folklore with mystical traditions like the Kabbalah. And so we see a lot of Victorian-era holiday cards with seemingly odd and kind of out-of-place symbolism. Like the forget-me-nots. They were a symbol of hope and tidings of good days to come as we cross the threshold of the new year, but there's also a tinge of Auld Lang Syne to them. Auld Lang Syne being a Scots phrase from a Robbie Burns poem that translates more or less to roughly the equivalent of days gone by or for old time's sake. So that little blue flower, the forget-me-not, is giving a bittersweet farewell to the old year with a promise to remember. But beyond that, forget-me-nots were a secret symbol among the Freemasons, another one of those secret societies that flourished in the era. The forget-me-nots were one of their symbols of fraternity and brotherly bonds, as well as resilience and loyalty. It was used a lot in Masonic rituals and planted in Masonic gardens outside their halls. So a little sidebar here. I can't resist saying this, even though it's only peripherally related, but I like to look at the larger social context of these historic phenomena. And it's something I've talked about in my Intro to Tarot courses. But one of the reasons secret societies flourished in the early years of the Industrial Revolution is because that's when we begin to see more of a stratification of society. It's like there were more rungs on the social ladder between the aristocratic elite and those who were not born into money and status, but maybe were building it through capitalism. And then beneath that, there's this subgroup of folks who were neither capitalists nor aristocrats, but they could see opportunities for achieving social rank by establishing groups with internal hierarchies, very much in the same way that the church had done for centuries. So at this time, we see this hybrid of spiritual hierarchy married with, like, we could almost call it entrepreneurial spirit, or, that kind of endeavoring kind of attitude. It starts to evolve at this time. And this is modeled also on the trade guilds, which for centuries prior, like since medieval times, trade guilds were where laborers would not only unite in common interest and sharing of knowledge, and where they established the apprenticeship system and quality control, but also they united for political voice. But in the heyday of spiritualism, in the early part of the Industrial Revolution, we see where light traces of mysticism in some of the guilds, especially the ones that had built a lot of churches over the years, like the Freemasons, we see them kind of get caught up in this mixture of spirituality and social climbing. And it really takes hold in the Freemasons, actually. The Freemasons as an organization kind of gets like swept up into this movement of spiritual enrichment, personal enhancement, and self-edification that eventually, like less than 100 years later in the 1960s, we recognize as the human potential movement. Okay, so now at this point in the podcast miniseries, we invoke Godwin's law, which states that as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison to the Nazis or Hitler approaches. It's like part of internet lore. Well, we're like a couple episodes into this miniseries, and we've hit it, my friends, because along the way, this ethos of personal ascendancy through spiritual excellence, that becomes really attractive over the decades to the blood and soil proponents of like Nazi Germany. And the Nazis like enshroud their eugenic agenda with environmentalism and organics and biodynamic culture and this like spiritual mystique. This is all part of the development of the mythology of the supremacy of an Aryan race. So, okay, I know, I'm taking you on a wild ride, right? From like innocuous, vaguely witchy little Victorian holiday cards to this like wide angle view of how folk magic can get pressed into the service of something much more sinister. But I mean, it's relevant even today with like the Make America Healthy Again rhetoric and like what we see with the anti-vax to green MAGA pipeline, okay? Okay. And now let's get to the glossary of cool Yule plant lore and symbolism. Yuletide plants. Let's talk about foraging for your rituals. When gathering greenery for decor or for a ritual fire, it's good to choose specific plants for their spiritual symbolism. From an animist perspective, of course, it's not symbolism. It's purpose and practice, meaning we don't assign a mental overlay of symbol onto a plant. The plant itself carries its own awareness and medicine through which it lives out its purpose. But whether you believe that plants have awareness or not, learning their special medicine and purpose is just being respectful, like learning a person's name and pronoun preferences and what kind of hobbies they're into. Perhaps you've always been drawn to a certain kind of greenery. Knowing their special purpose may give you some additional insight into why you love them. Particularly on December 22nd, the day of honoring land and spirits of place, a day when you might choose to make a ritual offering in exchange for bringing home some cuttings. It is good to know the character and medicine of the plants you might bring back inside to deck your halls. You may want to refresh your dining table or altar with a new floral arrangement on December 29th in honor of the Day of Blessings from the Earth. Now, let me tell you a bit about some of the Yuletide plants. Alder.
Because this tree has both male and female catkins, alder symbolizes balance and harmony between male and female aspects. It carries both directive and receptive energies. Amanita mushroom. Modern mythology seems to place Santa Claus in Lapland, a shamanic figure surrounded by elves and reindeer and amanita mushrooms. This is partially because reindeer do love eating these hallucinogenic mushrooms, so much so that indigenous Sami folk do have problems with reindeer sometimes bolting to go in search of the mushrooms. And the people of the reindeer do wear red and white clothing, and they do have peaked hats, and they are headed by a female shaman whose trance journeys are sometimes induced by these magical mushrooms. Apple tree. Humans have revered apple trees as great providers of both food and drink since prehistoric times. In Norse traditions, this is a tree of immortality, since the gods ate apples to keep them young. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. In Celtic traditions, apples are associated with rebirth and with the fairy realm, since Avalon, the otherworldly land ruled by the fairy queen Morgan Le Fay, was called Avaljach, the Isle of Apples. Ash. In both Celtic and Norse traditions, the world tree, Yggdrasil, was an ash tree. This tree is the great mother tree and a tree of enlightenment, similar to the Bo tree of India. Ash represents creation, manifestation, cosmic consciousness, and great spiritual power. Birch. Because it grows in groups, it symbolizes community and collective well-being. In the Druid tradition, birch represents new beginnings and cleansing the past. Cedar. Cedar is cleansing, protective, soothing, and encourages the growth of magical powers. Cedar amplifies the power and resourcefulness of the bearer. Fir. Fir stands for clarity, continuity, fortitude, and ancestry. It's a fixative for the spiritual powers invoked through ceremony. Hellebore. A well-known ally on the poison path, this toxic plant is known for banishing and exorcism. Ironically, in Christian plant lore, it's known as the Lenten rose or Christmas rose, which is attributed to the story of a young girl who presented a flower to the Christ child when she had no gift. Holly. An evergreen also known for banishing, it is highly associated with Father Winter in the form of the Holly King. Ivy. An evergreen often associated with women and the Sacred Mother archetype, ivy is one of the few green plants still available during winter that isn't a tree. Because of its tenacious binding qualities, ivy symbolizes fidelity, loyalty, and steadfastness. Juniper. Commonly used in seining, the Gallic tradition of blessing and cleansing. A purifier that banishes unwelcome energies and welcomes new friendly ones. Juniper is used in many tonics and digestifs for its antiseptic qualities. Since spending time indoors in Old Europe meant close quarters and increased health problems, juniper was highly valued in wintertime for its autoimmune and gastrointestinal support. Mistletoe. In Norse legend, the god Baldur had a premonition of his death by poisoning. His mother, Frigga, made everything in heaven or earth, including humans, plants, animals, and weapons, swear an oath not to harm him. Everyone and everything gladly made this promise because Baldur was so beloved. Unfortunately, Frigga overlooked mistletoe. Realizing this, Loki, the god of mischief, fashioned a poison-tipped arrow and convinced Baldur's blind brother to throw it at him. The mistletoe-poisoned arrow hit Baldur in the heart and killed him. However, Baldur was eventually resurrected, and in one version of the myth, Frigga declares mistletoe a symbol of love. Pine. Pine is connected to stars and the night sky, eternal life, soul journeys, cleansing, and release. Rose and rose hips. These are connected to several goddesses. Rose is a stand-in for love, compassion, nurturance, and beauty. Rose hips invite friendly supernatural allies to take up residence in your home. Rowan. The ultimate protector tree, rowan is also associated with the realm of fairy. It is very unwise to cut down a rowan tree. Spruce. Spruce represents generosity, conviviality, pure intentions, expressing our gifts, peace, and serenity.